Greetings, and welcome to the first annual Pacific Northwest Multicultural Reader Series and Film Festival, powered by Zoomcatchers. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat and we'll get to them at the end. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Chip Miller. Chip, take it away.
Hello, my name is Chip Miller. I am going to be your moderator for Where Do We Go From Here? The Next Steps in Multicultural Entertainment. On our panel today are Rhonda Wilson, Jungmin Kwon, and Don Wilson Glenn. Thank you for joining us.
Part of theater, and even though most of us do things in our own cultures and Black theater and whatever Asian, whatever our cultures are, this is the moment for us now to make that change and make people see that theater is about everybody, and it's one of the best leveling playing fields I've ever seen. And I see that with kids, I see that with adults. You come in with differences, but you're able to have a free voice to voice who you are. Doesn't matter who you are. So I think we have an opportune time right now to make a difference and go forward and not go backward.
Yeah, I totally agree with Rhonda. I concur what Rhonda just spoke. I also believe this is the moment as well. First of all, because of all the politics happening in this country, as well as in other countries, international relationship, and all the pandemic things. And we have witnessed a lot of conflicts and at the same time, solidarity among minority people. So at this moment, we have to realize there are a lot of energy and passion and anxiety, and then we have to try turn these energies into something positive and something optimistic in the future. Also, the pandemic situation changed a lot of what we think about cinema, with Netflix and Hulu, as well as YouTube. So I believe we should be open-minded to a lot of possibilities with this digital devices, digital technology available. So first, yes, something is changing in terms of cinematic technology, and then second, also something changing about what we think, how we are representing people of color at this moment. So yeah, definitely a lot of dynamic and a lot of turbulence at the same moment. That's how I define this particular moment.
Yeah, and I also think I really love the idea of where we all are starting from. Because going forward, we have to go forward, but we have to understand that we are coming from many different facets and many different places. And many of us started our journeys 35 years ago. Many of us was embracing of a non-traditional casting. Many of us became very aware of colorblind casting. Many of us have been fighting as artists to have a level ground for a very long time as activists, as artist activists. We have seen the levels come to a very practical place to say that, yes, we are out there auditioning and we are out there producing work, and the best work is being developed. But at the same time, we also understand, like one of the panelists said, that the theater is a beautiful place. The theater can be a perfect world, but what we have are the dynamics of an apartheid society, no matter where we are in the world, that actually destroys that structure of a perfect world of working in the theater, working with African-American designers and people of color all over, and saying that, wow, this can be accomplished, this unity can be accomplished to create this beautiful art. We have seen it so many times, but I think we're now at a starting line together as PLC people, as the white theaters, as Toni Morrison would say, the white gays. I think we're now able to have difficult conversations and move in a positive direction. And we're able to challenge and change the narrative. And we have to be responsible artists to do so. We have to be responsible theater owners, theater producers, we have to think outside of a box. And I think that's what the entire pandemic, George Floyd era, all of this is challenging us to be better artists. Oh, and by the way, the camera said that my host is not allowing me in. So maybe that's, yeah, you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it. So maybe because I had two opened.
I'm sure we will figure it out. But I love all of the things that you all are saying because they are really juicy and useful. There you are. Look at us. We're all together now. There's a juicy you, I think, all of the things that you're saying. And I think part of Don, you were saying something about time in the way that there's a long legacy of working and fighting towards this moment. And also when we arrive at this moment of George Floyd, but also in the middle of this pandemic, the way that technology has really altered the way not just activism works, not just the way art works, but the way our whole lives work. And
Absolutely.
How much does this moment of technology rapidly shifting? I mean, in our lifetimes, what we have seen in the way, I mean, a 1-year life cycle of technology at this point is huge in terms of steps forward. So using that, how is that affecting this trajectory? How are we feeling a lift of, to say, 35 years of working towards something? What has technology done to change that path?
Oh yeah, I think it is tremendous. I think we're going to take away from the pandemic, and we're going to take away all these wonderful things that we thought we were challenged with that we weren't able to do. We are going to see what we saw 40, 50 years ago, what we call the off-Broadway arena, where we were able to produce work that would never have been produced before. People would have never seen this particular work. I think we're looking at it in a new way. The technology is going to allow us to actually do and bring theater to new people. And I think it's wonderful. And we're going to take away, we're not going to go backwards. People are going to continue to go forward to try to use these new technologies in a way that is going to expand the theater, that is going to expand ideas and art. I've seen so many beautiful things just from the festival this past weekend, and it's just, we wouldn't have been able to do this if we hadn't been thinking outside of the box, you know? So that's my take on it.
Yeah, about technology, in my program, I teach film as well as social media. So whenever I teach social media class, I can see the students, film majors, are very, very curious and interested in how to use this newly emerged form to trigger their filmmaking, to distribute their film project, and to advertise their work. But at the same time, that I can see that they are ambivalent of adopting new technology, because in some ways they are kind of obsessed with this traditional form of cinema. Like we go to the movies and then watch a film with family or friends or significant others in a theater. So I think with this pandemic and with the rise of new technology, we found out this possibility that it doesn't have to be that theater. It can be, I mean, as Don mentioned, we are expanding how we produce films and how we advertise films and how we distribute our film products. So I definitely see that this is a huge opportunity for people of color who want to make films, because all the traditional film technology and distribution avenues are predominantly owned by cis-het white men, unfortunately. But these new channels are more passive toward non-traditional identities, and I can see that more people are uploading more independent artists and independent filmmakers uploading their films and they get reviews. It doesn't have to be always mass people that we have to reach out. We can just have a small number of people who watch our work and watch our evaluate our work, and then they will kind of work to advertise our work. So here I want to give an example of Korean culture. I'm not sure if you remember, in 2012 there was this Korean singer named Psy, and there was a huge, yeah his popularity of his music video Gangnam Style. So how it happened is definitely thanks to social media, especially YouTube. So he was of course already popular in South Korea, but his global popularity was enabled by YouTube. So it started with small fandom of global audiences who enjoyed K-pop music at the moment, and they started spreading word about his music video because the content was fun. So as long as content and the quality of the work is great, I think there's always possibility by promoting and uploading their work on new media. So of course, sometimes these media are disrupted by traditional conservative people, but at the same time, much more possibilities because traditional media is unfortunately, possessed by traditional identities.
I agree with what has been said. I'm just thinking about this pandemic and where we are now as well. It has caused, as Dawn and the other panelists have said, it made us think differently about what we're doing and doing it in a different way. And with theater, I think what has happened, because we are sometimes so traditional, and technology was always there, and film always was doing the right thing as far as how to film things and put it on the small screen. Theater didn't have to do that. So what we have to try to catch up with is that technology and how to film a play so people are okay looking at it, because they're used to watching things on small screens, used to watching YouTube videos. But when you film a play, sometimes the technology or the expertise, we don't have that. So we need to get in there and train ourselves to film those things so they will fit the same streaming platform as Amazon and Netflix and all those things, so people are engaged in watching it. Because I even see it with my students. If it's not flashy on their little thing, they won't watch it. Oh, that's an old movie. And not old, it's just that the way it's filmed is old because they're using an old camera. So we got to catch up with putting our stuff out there. And this is a perfect opportunity to do that. We just got to get some people engaged, and that being their expertise in filming a play. How do you do that and make people want to watch it? And I think it's some old home video or something like that, because that's kind of what people kind of think. So that's why I say, oh, we gotta be live theater. And yeah, we can't, but right now we can. In Florida, our numbers are crazy with COVID. So I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know when we'll get back to full live theater. I mean, we do some, but it's not gonna be like it was before. I don't think it's ever gonna be like it was before. We're seeing it, Broadway seeing it, off-Broadway seeing it. Now they're going to they're doing something here called parking lot theater, the old traditional somebody front porch theater. They'll go and set up a play in the park. So that's what where we are. So we can use our theaters that are sitting empty or dark because we can't, to film things that we can stream or can put out there quality wise. So that may be another avenue of expertise we need to look at, trying to push getting the resources to do that. We can't, use the recorder that we had sitting in the trunk for 10 years. We have to catch up with the other resources.
And to piggyback on that very quickly, I think over the years, me and producers like Damaris Webb and others that were in New York that experienced the off-Broadway experience and putting things together with just patchwork. We had a conversation just last week, and we were saying we never, as artists, as actors and playwrights, when we left our grad schools or our programs, we thought we would be out there in the world just like our counterpartners, our white students, others that were out there, that were going to go out there, that was going to act, that was going to direct, that was going to do what their specific degree said they were going to do. We thought we would be challenged with writing grants, knowing what a LECO is.
Yeah.
Putting together all these components that we wore so many hats because we had to. There were no roles out there for African American or people of color, so we had to create it. We not only had to create roles, we had to create theater companies. We had to create all these incredible things just so that we could get on the stage. So this is no different. We have the ingenuity to do so. We've proven that in the past. So somewhere along the lines, I think we are going to come into the future as POC people, and we're going to maneuver our way. Look at Tyler Perry. Look at all the work that's been done that just, fumbling through the dark and getting it done. And like you said, I've seen digital work from Broadway, and it's absolutely beautiful, but it costs money. And we're going to need, going forward, we're going to need to voice that POC people need money to produce this. We can't do it the way we did it 30 years ago with me and Damaris working at 3 jobs and putting every penny except for the rent into producing a play. We have to acknowledge from the NEA, from theater communication groups, from WAT theaters, we need your support,
Yes.
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 And with
all of that.
And with all of that, that leads to the question of, so where are we going? Like, and both, where are we going and how do you think we get there?
I'm gonna piggyback on what Don said. We have to learn how to do all those other things that the other theaters are doing. We can't just, I want to put on a play. Because, as artists, you just want to perform and say, if I put on a play, people are going to come see it. I don't have to worry about how do I get the money to buy a costume or build the set. So we have to get on that administrative side as well. We have to look at that because, it's a business. It's artistic, but it's also the other side, theater, film, or whatever. It's the business. So until we have to get that component, and that's why we're lagging behind because of not being able to receive those funds. Arts organizations, and we've been here a little while, and they've been here maybe less, but all they do is the people sign the check because they have we know why, but I'm just saying we have to work a little harder in getting that administrative part, maybe collaborating more with each other instead of everybody got their own little, pocket and you're going to do this, you're going to do this. Why don't we all come together at some point to do some things? So I think we have to address that administrative part to get the resources so we can go to the NEA and go to these foundations, these large foundations, and get these monies to do the beautiful filming because we're going streaming. The pandemic is not going away anytime soon. It's going to be in different forms, but it'll be here, or something else will be here where we have to figure out another way to show our work and let people see our work. And I've watched more streaming in this last year than I had ever watched before. I didn't even know some shows were even on the television until this pandemic hit. I said, I'm going through Amazon and Netflix. Oh, this is great. So, shows that feature people of color, because you don't see that on the regular ABC. You don't see that on the regular networks. I'm saying, wow, this is beautiful, because you're thinking it's not out there, but it is out there. And we can put ours out there too and let people know about this legacy of Black theater, people of color, theater for people of color. And we just have to have the resources to do it. I agree with Don. It takes money. It takes money. Regardless of what we say, it could be beautiful art. You can have the best show and you can have 2 people in the audience if you don't have the marketing and all of those other things in place.
I agree.
And I think there's something to that of like, I'm thinking of like television and the way we hear like television ratings and like the Nielsen ratings and how they've been reported historically. And each year we hear about each of these like touchstone television events having lower ratings. The Oscars the lowest rated, the Super Bowl low rate, like all of these things are dropping in ratings, and we're acting as if, well, that's a problem, that's a failing, how like there's less interest in it. And the actual reality is there's just so much more variety. We can see media in so many different ways now that we aren't stuck with, okay, there are 4 choices. So hundreds of millions of people are going to watch the same thing at the same time. We don't consume in that way anymore. And so I guess thinking about in this moment of transition, how we're talking about resourcing and the way that different organizations and different art making commodities are resourced differently. And I think tied to resource is reach. And this question of my resources can only allow for such a reach. And I think so many of us are thinking, how do we expand that reach? And so what are different ways as we move into the future that we can expand that reach, knowing that as we expand our reach, does that not make it so that the size of these pools may get smaller and smaller because there's more specialized options for people to say, no, this is the very specific thing that I want to watch, and there are 1,000 of us who want to watch it.
I think one of the things we have to do, we have to continue to use the resources that are out there. We have to continue to reevaluate programs that actually worked. We have to, for example, the best example I can tell you, being a part of the theater, coming along in the 70s and the 80s, that there was an initiative to say that women playwrights needed to be heard from that period to the 80s and early 90s. And it made such a difference when the theater communication groups got with the unions, got with larger commercial theaters and said, we have to hear these voices. We wouldn't have had Wendy Wasserstein, or Paula Vogel, or Marsha Norman, or Beth Henley, or Carol Churchill, all these women playwrights that emerged that gave us wonderful theater. Those voices wouldn't have been heard if it wasn't for an initiative that was made and a demand that was made. So we have to look at that. And when you say resources that are out there, we have to say what worked and what didn't work. And we also have to continue to reevaluate the things that didn't work. We have to see from 1965, I often think about my parents and growing up during the end of integration or this apartheid era. And I often hear my mom and my dad would say, we didn't ask them to close our schools. We just wanted better books. You know, we just wanted the same facilities that the white facilities had. You know, I think we have to avoid those situations as we're going forward to say, no, we don't want you to close our institutions. We want you to find ways, and that's the NEA and other organizations. We want you to find ways to maintain them, because there are ways out there. We also have to go forward and say to our own community, we need to form endowments for the arts, because once we in our own communities have African Americans or POC neighborhoods that are donating, then the National Endowment of the Art is going to say, hey, there's interest within the community. So also let's put money into the interest as well. So going forward, we have to use every means necessary. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Sorry. Please go first, Rhonda.
Oh no, I was just saying I agree. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, I agree as well. And so my idea about this is more about practical side, not about more fundamental solution to solve this problem, if there's any. I'm a scholar, but at the same time, I need money to fund my research, because I have to interview people, I have to fund my travel, and so I have to apply for funds available, a lot of financial resources as well. And so many times I get turned down because my research is not very interesting to people who decide, usually the white men, I would guess. So what I found out is that there are more resources than I thought, surprisingly. So it doesn't have to be about art funds. It doesn't have to be about film. There are more general funds that just support scholars who need money. So I just apply for all kinds of available funds as long as it is not specific to discipline. So I let them know that there are work about art, there are work about film. So let them know that you can fund artistic projects so that you can advertise your funds or your institution by having your name in my work. And if I get declined, what I do is that I just email them, and then you have to consider this kind of project from people of color, because for to generate more constructive conversation about whatever topic they are dealing with. So even though I am declined, I just let them know that there are other people who want to do this for next year. You should consider accepting this applicant so that they can better listen to minority voices. So yeah, so I would say that it's getting harder and harder because we have more artists and more scholars, but less funds available because of the pandemic situation and because of not so positive politics currently going. So in this very competitive situation, I would say that you just try to look for more resources which are not specific to arts, not specific to film, and then keep applying. Let them know that you are there, and then let them know that they should accept other kinds of work.
Right. But we actually, as POC people, we need to find those type of platforms that are going to encourage and teach us how to fill out these forms. I think the best example is I'm here in East Texas, and we're still dealing with Katrina. We're still dealing with FEMA having money for people that were affected by Katrina. But the problem was going into New Orleans and going into the neighborhoods that were affected, that were POC neighborhoods. These neighborhoods didn't have the resources to sit down and say, how do I fill out the form to receive this money? So a lot of people just shook their heads and said, I don't even know how to ask for it. You keep telling me that there's money out there, but I don't know how to ask for it. So I think we need to be better educated in understanding, like you said, there are other avenues, there are other founders and other grantors that are out there that are not just in the arts, but also want to put their name and their spin on helping the survival of PLC art. So we have to be more diligent about that. Maybe going forward, we have to also look at a weekend of just sitting down and doing grant writing. Going forward, we may need to go to a seminar of that is going to educate us more about what a grant want, because doing grants, sometimes you put the wrong thing down, it goes into the trash. So we need to be better educated. And I agree that there are so many other possibilities out there for funding, but we're so stressed out about just keeping our doors open. And one thing, Jungmin, you said that was very interesting, and coming out of 30 years of the theater, where producers, white men, were able to say, that's a wonderful play, but I don't think I'm going to have anybody interested in producing 5 Black women on stage in a kitchen. You know, that was okay for them to say that, 30 years ago. Right. And it still is an underlying okay to say, I don't know if my season is going to accept that, my season ticket holders, you know. So once again, we take down the black and white only signs, but it's still running underneath. And we have to, I think where we are, we're at a point now where we can change and challenge the narrative that was given to us. Let's not calling it Jim Crow or de facto segregation. Let's call it apartheid, what it was. No blacks, no Jews, no niggers, no Mexicans, no Irish. And I think even in Portland, they added the Italians. So let's start changing the narrative and say what it is. Then we can say, oh, no, we do not call it manifest destiny. It was genocide, you know? So I think we're at that point where we can challenge our mainstream theaters to say, the narrative that you gave us was not correct. And we needed presented the way, as August Wilson said, from our voice, our stories, and going forward, we're able to say that. And when August Wilson said it in the 80s, it was not received very well at all in the theater community. The white theaters actually felt that he was biting the hand that fed him. And then there were other African Americans that felt, well, I'm not going to go down that road with August Wilson because I'm getting produced and I don't want that to stop. One of the interesting films that I saw this weekend was Reviving the Nod. And I remember in a section of that film, it was really something that happened to me as well, when I nodded to a Black person and they didn't nod back, you know, that feeling of, wow, we're not on the same page. So I think going forward to people of color, not just within our community or within our same races, as a collective group of people, we have to acknowledge each other. We have to be on each other's side, you know, we have to find ways that we can communicate better.
That is a perfect segue to some of the questions that we've been getting in the Q&A. And thank you all for these robust and really depthful answers, because I think that, again, to go back to the original point of we all have very different places of where we think we are now, and therefore we are all going to have very different ideas of the path to where we're going because our paths are all different. We can have a shared goal, but the path to get there is an individual one. And I think something that all of you have brought up about that path is the need for community and the need to have that of the idea of how to share resources. That's community-based engagement. That's been like, and that building community around liberation and building community around education is inherent in art. That that art is both a place to communicate with an audience, but we work in collaborative arts, or we study collaborative arts, and that inside of the making and the study of these things and the discourse around them is a place to talk about liberation. That it is at every step of a touchstone for the art is a place to build community. One of the Q&A questions is, I've been wrestling, as I think do a lot of white artistic directors new to anti-racism work, with the worry of, wait, if diversifying means embracing our voice, our stories, our way, then what about the company vision and what about our standards of quality? Do we still get to define those standards? How do we adjust that so everybody wins? I'm going to, I will hop in because I have a lot of strong opinions about this, which I guess my first thought is there a different standard of quality for white work and non-white work? I don't think there should be. I think that there may be a bias to believe that white work is of a higher quality, probably because it's better resourced, and probably because you see more of it, so it reflects more of what we've been told is of a high quality. But I think the standard of any producer is, if I invite an artist in to make their art, I've hired them to make their art, not to make the art I want them to make. So I think if there's a moment where you're saying, I'm hiring this non-white artist to come in and make their art, and I'm going to tell them how to do that, well, they're not making their art anymore. They're making the art you want them to make. And that is a very different thing than saying, oh, wow, I think you have something to say. I really appreciate you as an artist. I support you as an artist. And now, because I have this space and these resources, I am going to uplift you so that you can have your process to make the thing that you want to make. Because who am I to tell you how to make your art? I can't tell anyone in this room how to make their art because I'm not you. And I think that there's a paternalism that has existed in the relationship between artistic director and director, writer, performer, that is based on this idea that being given the role of artistic director means you have the best taste and you are the arbiter of it, and that your job is to show everyone how smart you are. Whereas really, artistic director is a job of being a community leader. And part of being a community leader is saying, I'm bringing in artists who I think the community needs to engage with. And that's where your curatorial eye is saying, this is the grouping of artists that I want to stand in collaboration and conversation with. And then letting them tell their stories, letting them make their art, rather than saying, all of you are going to come to my theater and make your version of art that fits in my theater's model. Because then you get a bunch of art that is similar, even with different perspectives, because there's one overriding eye on it. That, again, I have very strong opinions on that, but I would love to hear.
That is a lot to unpack, because agreed, what's quality? Just because it's a person of color means that quality is less, or what your idea of quality is because it's an all white version of it. But again, with this whole resurgence of, we're supporting our Black artists and our Black community. So a lot of the white organizations are either hiring or reaching out to directors, artists of color, but again, limiting them on what they can produce, or what they can, or we need you to direct Raisin in the Sun, or we need you to, they're telling them what to do that's okay for their white theater. We're okay with that show, but we don't want to do, Katori Hall, or something more, we don't want to do things like, we want to do Raisin in the Sun and maybe To Kill a Mockingbird with some Black people in it. So that's what we have to change. That we have to say our stories are a fabric of this country. Whether it's, doesn't mean all Black stories only have Black people in them. It just means the voice is different. And we're missing that when you hire a Black director or a person of color to be a part of that artistic vision. You got to allow their voice to be heard. Because you can tell when a story that's a Black story is written by somebody that's not Black. You can almost tell, because there's some things that they say or they assume that how we speak or something like that. So I think we have to be adamant about it and be intentional and be strong about it, because if we give in, we'll be setting ourselves back years. Mm-hmm. If we say, okay, I'll just do that this time, but next, maybe, and then they've done it for the year and they've checked the box. Mm-hmm. And then go with the next round. Oh yeah, I had that show. I had that person doing this, and they were our interim director of the whatever. So, or they have you directing, Oklahoma. I don't know. I'm just using those as examples. Right. So we have to be intentional about what we want. Do we just want to work, or we want our art to be a part of the arts community? So.
I think, Chip and Rhonda, I think you bring up some very interesting points. And one of the things over the years, I can chime in as a playwright and as an artist, over the years of working with places like the New Dramatists, working with Signature Theater, all these wonderful organizations, that I was always very impressed that the playwrights that were coming in and out, that were mainly white, I was always very impressed that they were always invited to lecture. They were always invited to workshop. Across the country. So when a particular play that they have worked on for 5 years come to ART or come to a mainstream theater, that play has so many hands behind it, so many communities behind it, so many villages behind it, helping that play get to a place to go to another workshop situation. So it's not the idea that African-American playwrights, I can say playwrights, African-American playwrights are not being given the opportunity to come into to work or workshop, or what they may have a better situation. But the thing is, we're not given the opportunity as playwrights of white playwrights that are given to come into different theaters, to workshop for 5-6 years of play, and then given the opportunity to go to a main stage house that say that this play is ready. This play is ready to be staged because of all of the opportunities that it has had. Usually, we only have that one opportunity, and that's to workshop it, put it on its feet, and then it goes away.
Yeah.
So when another main stage theater sees that play, they're like, maybe the quality is a little off because it hasn't had 5 years of going through all these major theaters, all these major directors, all these designers giving ideas and table work and all of that. I don't know why. I'm going to quote James Baldwin. I don't know why that situation is the way it is. I don't know why working in a theater for 35 years and people like Jacqueline Wade, Ed Bullocks, Lawrence Holder, Rome Neal, Thomas Melanson, Eugene Lee, Sylvia Gonzalez, Bunny Wright, all these playwrights that have written 10 to 30 plays have not been given the opportunity to come in and lecture, come in and workshop, come in and put their plays together so that when a main stage theater see it, they're like, yeah, this is quality work. Yes, the community has worked on this so that it can be presented very strongly. I think those are the issues that Chip that we tend not to have the opportunity to have. And yes, those plays that have had 4 or 5 years of workshop, yes, those plays are stronger than a play that has only had the one opportunity. So looking at it in that way, we need the opportunity as African-American playwrights to be able to be invited to mainstream theaters.
But I also think we have some onus in the fact that if we have these if we have these theaters, like myself, I'm intentional about trying to find new works that have not produced all the time. Yeah, some of them are better than others, but until we allow those things to happen in that space, you can't comment on to that writer, say maybe we could do this and tweak that. So we have to get into the smaller spaces to be able to do those works. So we as people of color who have spaces available have to open up those spaces too.
Absolutely.
To people a chance to rise or fall or comments, or it happens. People write and they workshop and they have feedback, and because I've gone to them, so I think we have to also say, but what the other side of that is, we have these spaces, but we're so busy trying to keep the doors open till we have to go back to the Raisin in the Suns and the August Wilson and that kind of thing. So two sides of that. That's where the money and the grants have come in to do new works or something like that. We have to look at some of those things.
Right.
And I think something that's really interesting about this conversation, that it continues to come back to the idea of, to get to the future, we need to be better resourced in the present. The way to get to where we want to go is resources. And we speak so much. This is a time where we talk about abundance versus scarcity, and it is one thing to live in the mindset of abundance. It is another thing to live in the reality of abundance. And that difference is striking, and one that I think is very felt in this conversation. I want to try to get to, we have quite a few questions in the Q&A. We only have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to start with a question for Dr. Kwon. With more streaming platforms available for films, will this encourage the next generation of filmmakers to share their stories?
Thank you so much, Chip, for reading that question for me. Yes, definitely yes, because the next generation of filmmakers have seen that more films to be produced, more films to be available on multiple streaming platforms. For example, especially for minority populations like younger filmmakers and LGBTQ plus filmmakers and people of color filmmakers. I mean, it's still very relatively small number, but at the same time, we see a very small increase in terms of stories from less privileged young filmmakers compared to the past. But at the same time, I want to point out that the fact that the next generation of filmmakers are encouraged to share their stories doesn't necessarily mean that they are able to share their stories, because as we can see, the online streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu are increasingly operating just like major film studios, because they have a lot of filmmakers to submit their playwrights or scenarios to their companies. So gatekeeping does happen with this online streaming services. At the same time, they are now big commercial countries, regardless of the format that they have, either online or offline. They just work like Disney. They just work like MGM or Sony, Columbia. So they are encouraged, of course, but at the same time, they cannot guarantee their stories to be directed. So at this point, what I tell and what I encourage my student filmmakers to do is that you just have to diversify your options. It doesn't have to be film streaming sites like Hulu or Netflix. It doesn't have to be traditional way of distribute your work, to share your work. There are more and more ways to create your work. Like, for example, we see that the gaming industry is getting huge. It's actually much bigger than the film industry at this point. Also, TV, you can see the very fine line between TV films and TV contents and films. And then also we have YouTube, in which a variety of media contents is being uploaded every day. So you have to think about other ways to share your stories. It doesn't have to be a traditional notion of film. It can be video game, which is very primarily anti people of color stories, and you can knock the door, and also you should try create TV films, and you should try YouTube films. So by doing that, at some point you will see the more and more work of yours will be available online, and then probably you will be able to try the mainstream studios. So for the younger filmmakers, do not stick with the idea of going to the mainstream studio directly. It's less possible even for white filmmakers at this point, because the market is so competitive. It's already red ocean. So try with new avenues, not only online streaming services, but also other storytelling platforms, and then build up your career, and then when you're ready, go for the mainstream studio if you want. That would be my answer. I hope this answers.
I love that. And it is a thing I think goes beyond just the film industry, but is so clear of like this need to dismantle what we have created as a hierarchy of success. I know it's like, oh, if I have a movie produced by Warner Brothers, that means success in a different way than if I have a film that is streaming on YouTube. And the reality is, like, it's the same job in a different room. I had a friend who had a show on Broadway, and I was like, are you excited about this? Are you scared? Are you nervous? And he said, it's the same job, just in a different room. And it was the best perspective I was ever given of like, oh yeah, we're all doing the same thing. We have created, and it's partly because of this very conversation about resources. And the bigger the room, the greater the resources is often the case. And we know who gets control of the bigger rooms, and as a result, who gets to play those bigger rooms. But we have to dismantle the idea that resource and quality, or resource and value, are inherently linked, because the value is that it exists. The value is that you made it. You've done the same act of creating. It's just playing in a different arena. So I really love that idea of, we have to stop focusing on trying to play in these systems that have been established to keep people out, to keep
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
The same film is perfect, because you see that I watch films that are not necessarily on the big screen. I haven't been to the big movie theater. Well, nobody has really, but even then I would find things on, like, these little movies or films everywhere. But in theater, everybody has to say, if you don't make it to Broadway, you're not successful. But there's theater everywhere in the country, in the world. And if your work gets produced on a stage and people see it and you're proud and you've done what you needed to do, it's the same. I think the people who get it to Broadway have the heart, as the stress level goes up, because you have to make money. You have to make real money. And even though people with the big blockbuster plays on Broadway, they barely break even. You have a few shows that break even all the time, or make profit. Lion King maybe, and Wicked or something, I don't know. But those other little plays, that's why the plays open and close so fast on Broadway. Really good stuff opens and closes on Broadway. But when it goes to these regional houses or these local theaters, professional theaters, it does well, because that's where your overhead is lower. But you still, like your friend said, it's the same. I'm just putting it somewhere else. And if you get somebody to back you on Broadway, more power to you. But if you don't stop doing the work. Don't stop writing. Don't stop trying to get it produced. And you're right. We have to know that there's other options, especially now with streaming. There's so many options now.
Another question from the chat. Multicultural entertainment, is it a trend or a new cultural change for theater and films? I'm going to say, I don't think it's a trend, and I also don't think it's a change. I think there's always been an intersectionality, to use today's terms, in the art. It may not be mainstream, and I think that's the question. I think that's a big question of, like, is it becoming mainstream? Well, I think that the world is changing because we all talk to each other on the internet every day, and that a lot of the things that we've been told about the world that media was able to narrate, we can't really hide from. I think, not to get too political, but we are in the moment of, like, watching what's happening in Afghanistan. And our relationship to that right now is very different because of our access to the internet and different perspectives than it would have been 20 years ago when we were getting traditional media telling us. And I think that we have to stop thinking that just because we see it now, it's a trend or it's new. It just means that more people see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And once again, I think the availability of what we see today, we can Google, we can open up our phones, we open up our laptops, we can see diversity in so many places across the world. And I think that's the beauty of the internet. And I think that's the beauty of technology. And technology is going to lead us forward. Technology is going to challenge those ideas of what we are now seeing today. And going forward, I don't think just non-people of color have to be more sensitive to our stories. I think we have to be more sensitive to our stories as well as POC people, to understand the type of American experiences that we have been given as our textbooks is not the African American experience. For example, slavery is not the African American experience. My people did not come over here and decide to be enslaved or had legislation that continued slavery. So slavery is the American experience, and the African people that endured it were survivors of it. So once again, we have to be sensitive enough to understand and listen to the narrative as the narrative changes. And we have to challenge that narrative. The same as Native American people. My people didn't disenfranchise my land, my ownership. My people didn't take my identity away. That was the American experience. So we got to start labeling what the truth is so that people can better understand and we can better understand our situations.
Thank you so much. I just realized what time it is, and that means we have reached our hour. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you to the three of you for joining me. And thank you.
It was exhilarating.
Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
You too.